So there's a million garden planning videos out there that will tell you step by step how to do your garden planning. However, I don't think there's as many videos about garden planning in a way that creates a low maintenance garden. And honestly, a lot of that doesn't come down to tools you have to buy, but more just strategies that you can implement to organize and prepare yourself as part of your garden planning so that when it's time to actually get planting and get stuff in the ground, it just kind of can all go really smoothly. We talked about organizing your seeds so that you were prepared to actually plant them. And we're gonna get into layouts. I do have a layout video from last year that you can check out in the meantime. But before we get into actually layouts, I think it's really important that we talk about the strategy behind the layouts, because for me, knowing what's going where starts with companion planting. Companion planting has eliminated the need for me to use any kind of other chemical or other kind of physical intervention in my garden to keep pests away, as well as just improving yields and all sorts of other benefits that we'll get into. So we'll get into those benefits in a second. We'll also get into my favorite plants to companion plant with so that you have kind of a starting point and a little bit more about the strategy as you're going into planning your garden layouts, what you need to be thinking about, and kind of how to make these decisions, what goes into the thought process behind it for me. Before we do that, it's been about 6 weeks since I think I've shown you what's growing in the greenhouse right now. And honestly, it's not that much. So I had surgery and I only was able to come out here a few times over the last month to check on things and make sure that it had fertilizer and water. And this, I basically used the same method in here that I used in the hoop house, where I'm just keeping them under this frost cloth for a little extra layer of warmth. I've been having a learning curve with this. There's been a few issues. So you'll see like some things are looking really good, like this lettuce, which is honestly kind of surprising because in the hoop house, I had the most issues with keeping lettuce alive because it's the least cold tolerant. So we know temperature wise, just based off of that things are okay, even though I can feel that these containers are freezing solid on occasion. So I think a big part of that is that they're not in the ground and they're separated, so they don't have as much insulation from the ground as I did when everything was in the hoop house. I'm really strongly debating if I need to revise this entire table setup situation that I have and do some kind of built-in bench, or maybe even move something like one of these types of raised beds inside and then put some kind of drip tray on the floor underneath. But I mean, I've been thinking about this and what I want to do with it literally since last April when we got the Hometown Structures greenhouse. And I just can't decide on an option. I'm having decision fatigue about it, so I would really like to hear what you think I should do in this space. I've also considered converting this whole wall into metal shelving for seed starting, partially because it's just not being used very functionally right now, and partially just to block the street here. Going on in here, I've just got my rosemary overwintering, which it's very happy, and I'm happy about that. Lots of carrots back there. There's some spinach and a lot of lettuce in here, which is so great to have this time of year. But I think there's even some spinach and mizuna in this one as well, just a whole bunch of stuff. And then on this side, it's a little bit sadder. So this was a bunch of beets that I did and they came up, but I feel like we're having some issues with light. So not so much temperature, but because this tree line here is still fully shaded with leaves in November before they all drop, and the sun is so low, I don't think that this area gets enough sun at the pivotal time where these seedlings needed the most of it. So one of the things that I'm going to change is I'm going to start a lot of my winter stuff next year this year under grow lights and then move it out into the greenhouse. That's a whole nother thing I kind of need to address. There's a bunch more mizuna and lettuce endive in here. Honestly, it's like the lettuce is the happiest. I had some bok choy, but it got some kind of bug on it that I had never seen before, so that I had to put outside. All of these are just the peppers I'm trying to overwinter, although they turned really brown and crispy even though I've been watering them, so I'm not convinced they're gonna make it. And this is my tea plant, so also looking very sad right now. It has honestly just been a really weird week for me. This is my first week kind of back to filming multiple times a week after not filming for almost 2 months, dealing with all my health stuff. And I literally started off the week with an earthquake. Like we had I think it was a 3.8 magnitude earthquake off of the coast of Maine. So it wasn't even really near us, but our house was shaking. It was just very unsettling. We're dealing with like weird ice issues because it's been so cold. I'll pop a video up here what I had to do to our gutter. In case you don't live in a cold area and you were considering moving somewhere cold, you should know this is what you have to look forward to. I think it's because that gutter is shaded by the greenhouse down, and so it doesn't get as much direct sunlight during the day. I think I'm just feeling like flustered, like trying to get back into the swing of things, and also planning my own garden. We are going to be planting a friend's garden this year, which I'm so excited to be able to talk to you guys about. So the layout video from last year is talking a lot about my garden layout and how I did it. And honestly, I'm not changing a lot this year. I'm just shifting what is in what bed so that we're not putting tomatoes in a bed that had tomatoes last year and things like that. But I'm designing a whole new, brand new garden from scratch for my friend Roxy. She's in New Jersey, but she's actually in the same grow zone as me, so in 6B. So it'll be easy in that regard. However, our challenge with Roxy's garden is that it needs to be dog friendly or dog proof in some regards. So I'm waiting for her to send me over what I need from her in terms of what she wants to plant, how big she wants the bed to be, and then we're going to design the space and do the layouts, and I will bring you through that whole process. So if you do have any specific questions about dog friendly gardens, you can put those in the comments here and I'll try to get to them when I do that video. It's actually pretty warm in here. So there is a lot of science behind companion planting in all the different ways that it can benefit your garden. There's actually 5 main ways that it can benefit your garden that are all very different. I think especially just like with the state of the world recently, I've been thinking a lot about less the scientific elements and more the symbolic elements of companion planting, because it illustrates so beautifully how nature, including us, is all so interconnected and thrives in community. And I think these days we need community more than ever. I'm hoping this kind of helps to illustrate that to you as well as we're going through this, that everybody has their own kind of special skill set that maybe seems subtle or unimportant, but it has immense value as we're navigating these tumultuous times. Gardening for me has never just been about growing food or even just about going in and connecting with nature. There's so much symbolism to be found and so many lessons in how we can be better humans. So, benefits of companion planting. The number one benefit of companion planting that I think you'll see the most is in terms of pest control. And one of the most common plants that we'll see for pest control for companion planting is marigolds. So there's countless different varieties of marigolds. I actually did a whole video about the edible versus inedible varieties of marigolds last summer, which I'll link for you. And if you're getting starts from a nursery, a lot of the times the label doesn't specify what kind of marigold it is, which can make it a little bit trickier. So I do recommend starting it from your own seed if you can't find a nursery that labels it more specifically, because what you want is French marigolds. And that's just because they have the most potent aroma. And a lot of the times with the companion plants that are resisting pests, what it's really doing is it's emitting a smell that the pests don't like, so they don't come near it. French marigolds specifically are very resinous, so that means that the compounds that make it kind of sticky, almost like we have with calendula, are also the aromatic compounds that have the most potent scent. I love to get flats of like 12 marigold plugs and stick them in every single bed that I can, but most specifically I like to put them in with my tomatoes because they're really good at repelling hornworms. And if you've ever grown tomatoes and experienced hornworms, you know how quickly they can devastate an entire tomato bed. I literally looked at my tomatoes one evening, they were fine, came out the next morning less than 12 hours later, and entire plants were just eaten down to nothing. Like, they work fast, and it was just a single hornworm that did that damage. So not only will marigolds repel hornworms, French marigolds are also edible, and they just add some beautiful contrasting color to the garden as well. So you get lots of different benefits in there. The second way that companion plants can benefit your garden is in disease prevention. This one's a little bit more complicated planted. Scientifically, there's a lot going on underneath the ground with chemicals being extruded through the root systems. So a really good example of this would be garlic and roses. So if you plant garlic near your roses, it can actually help prevent black spot. I've also heard, I really want to try this next year actually, that you should plant your garlic around your fruit trees. And this comes back more to the pest prevention element. Planting your garlic around your fruit trees is said to repel deer. So I know this is a huge issue, especially with backyard orchard culture, where we're keeping our trees really small and low to the ground and easy for deer and squirrels to access. If you can ring your fruit trees with garlic, it's supposed to actually help keep those pests away so they don't nibble quite as much. I wouldn't overwhelm yourself with thinking about companion plants so much for disease prevention. I think that's more of kind of an advanced use for companion planting. I don't typically use them this way. I think, again, there's a lot more science behind it that you have to understand, which can be pretty overwhelming as you're first starting out. It's even overwhelming for me now. But it's a really interesting aspect of it, and maybe for you that is a priority. So taking into consideration your specific challenges that you think you might face or you know you're facing in the garden when you're going through these benefits can help you in making those decisions on what to plant where. So garlic is a really great companion plant for that. I'll also rope in kind of all alliums into this category. If you can plant chives, leeks, walking onions, pretty much anywhere in your garden, that's going to repel all sorts of bugs and deer and munching critters that you don't like, because they don't like oniony flavors or smells. Chives are really, really easy to grow, and if you have one bunch of them, you can separate them out and kind of scatter them everywhere. Companion plants can also improve yield. A really good example of this is the Three Sisters method. The Three Sisters method is a really great illustration of how plants can work symbiotically together. So you have corn. You plant the corn and then you wait for these stalks to start growing upwards. And after those stalks are a little bit established, you're gonna add in your beans. Those beans will actually climb the corn like a trellis. So the beans are being helped upward by the corn, but they're also fixing nitrogen in the soil, which is gonna benefit the corn as well as the squash that you're gonna plant later on. Plant the squash as a ground cover. So this acts as a living mulch. It retains moisture in the garden bed. It shades the plants so they're not exposed to as many extreme temperature fluctuations. And it just so happens that they all taste really good when combined together. This is a really great way that plants can work in harmony to increase yield, as well as repelling insects that you don't want in the garden. Companion planting is a really great way to attract beneficial insects to your garden as well. So this gives us a full circle ecosystem at this point. Not only are we repelling the things that don't really share the space in a way that is, I don't know, fair or equitable, we're attracting things that will help us in other ways in the garden. So two of my favorite bugs that we can try to attract to the garden are ladybugs and lacewings. And the best way to attract ladybugs and lacewings are with plants like alyssum and yarrow. Both of these plants can be medicinal. They can be used in teas. I found them to be really low maintenance to grow, and attracting these insects just helps to maintain a balance in your garden. You're never going to completely eradicate the bad bugs. We don't want that. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. And if you use companion planting, you shouldn't ever have to use chemicals in your garden. If your garden gets to a point where it requires chemical intervention in order to thrive, what that's telling me is that you're not in balance with the ecosystem. You're not creating something that might be replicable by nature itself. And we always want to be working with nature, not against it, especially when we're talking about creating a low maintenance garden. If you're dealing with physical limitations, some kind of chronic illness like I am, I mean, what could be more low maintenance than just planting the things that need to be planted where they need to be planted? If you start adding in chemical treatments that you have to do weekly, monthly, whatever it is, that is not low maintenance. And the fifth way that companion planting can help your garden is by improving soil quality and soil structure. So another example of where beans are really great because they fix nitrogen into the soil. So it's important to note that when you're using beans, this isn't an immediate fix. You have to wait for the plant to die back. You can't rip it out by the roots. You need to cut it at the base and let the roots decompose in the soil so that that nitrogen can return to the soil. But we've already talked about beans. So for this category, our fifth companion plant on the list is actually daikon radish, which is something, believe it or not, I've never grown before, but I've seen a lot of other gardeners have extreme success with it, because if you have really compacted soil, a daikon radish is a huge root vegetable, and you could do this with any root vegetable, but we're going to talk about daikon radish because it's one of the most well known for this method, because it punches through the soil and it breaks it up for you. So you don't need to till, which I personally avoid tilling because I believe it destroys the natural microbiome in the soil. It's basically nature's tiller. I think what this goes to show is that there's literally a plant for every purpose. And I truly believe there's a person for every purpose too. Like there's someone, everyone has something to offer that can help others and build community. I'm still working out what my role in this community building that we're trying to do is. I think a lot of it is just teaching people how to grow their own food in an empowered way, no matter what their physical limitations are. But I also think just noticing the ways that community is built in nature can be so helpful in understanding what our role is. So these are our top 5 companion plants. I'm going to link down below to a chart that you can grab with a few more combinations that I've just thrown together for you. Before I get into kind of our bonus round, where I'm going to give you some popular companion planting combinations outside of those top 5, there's 2 things I need your help with. The first thing is I've been diving into the analytics here on YouTube, trying to figure out how I can better serve you guys as a community. And one of the things that I noticed in diving into those analytics is that over 80% of the people watching this video right now are not subscribed to the channel. That's a really high number. It's kind of honestly a little bit embarrassing to admit, but it's a very easy thing to fix if I know why you haven't subscribed yet. So if you don't want to hit that subscribe button right now so that you don't miss future videos like this, can you let me know in the comments why you haven't hit subscribe yet, and if there's something that I can be doing differently to serve you better to earn that subscription, because YouTube is hopefully going to become my main platform and way of supporting myself as a creator with chronic illness over the next year or so. We're getting very, very close to 100,000. It's a huge milestone. It's honestly shocking and amazing to me. I get emotional when I talk about the fact that there's so many of you that care about this and want to be a part of this movement to create more accessible gardening spaces for everyone. And then the second thing that I need your help with is we're headed into really the thick of it with garden planting season. If you need gardening supplies, which nobody should ever tell you that you do, you can make do with literally a bucket. You don't have to buy things to start a garden, is my point. But if you are going to buy things to start your garden, head down to the description of this video and see if any of the things that you're gonna buy are linked there. Because while this channel is monetized, a very large portion of my income actually comes from commissions that I get through sales to those links. So it doesn't cost you anything extra. They don't up the price in order to pay me a sales commission, but these are products that I know and love and use, have used for many years, and highly recommend. So if it's helpful to you to go off of my recommendations when you're making your garden purchases, shopping through those links is a really great way to support me without you having to actually spend additional money. Let's get into our bonus round. We've got some popular companion planting combinations for some of the most popular things that we grow. And we're gonna start off with tomatoes again. Of course, we've already discussed how marigolds are really great to grow with tomatoes. However, one of my other favorite things to grow with tomatoes is basil. There's some evidence, it's maybe anecdotal, I don't know, that shows that tomatoes actually taste better when they're grown with basil. Now, I think it's just really nice to grow things together that you like to cook together, but basil is also an aromatic plant. So even if it's not improving the flavor of the tomatoes, it is also very good at repelling pests that you don't want in your garden. There's a whole bunch of things that you're not supposed to grow together as well. So kind of the inverse of companion plant. So if you want a video about that, let me know and we can do one of those too. And a third thing that grows really well with tomatoes is carrots, because tomatoes are primarily something that's growing above ground. Carrots can grow in the spaces in between your tomatoes. They're getting that shade from tomatoes so that they don't get too hot and they can stay damp more easily while they're trying to germinate, which is a huge challenge when growing carrots. Speaking of carrots, if you're doing a big main crop of carrots, some of the things that you can companion plant with your carrots are lettuce, because again, they're another cool season crop with a shallow root system, so they're not going to be competing for space underground. You can also grow a first round of radishes, because by the time the radishes are done, your carrots will be just starting to mature. So this is another element of companion planting, is timing and days to maturity, which is something gets a little bit complicated and we don't have to get super into it, but radishes mature really fast. Carrots, I think, usually take about 70 to 80 days, and radishes are like 12 to 30 days. So you can get those radishes out of there before the carrots are done, and you've really maximized the space, right? You're using the space to its most potential. I haven't tried this myself, but I have read that growing onions or anything in the allium family with your carrots can help repel, I think it's carrot flies. I know there's a big one that affects carrots. I've never had an issue with it, knock on wood. I don't know if that's a regional thing, but it's just not something that I've dealt with here, but alliums can be really good to plant with carrots too. Brassicas have become the bane of my existence because of the cabbage white butterflies that just go absolutely bonkers for it. Supposedly, if you plant really strong aromatic herbs like parsley, dill, basil, oregano, thyme, rosemary, these kinds of plants in combination with your brassicas might help to deter some of those cabbage white butterflies. Personally, I've found the only thing that definitely works on repelling those from brassicas is some kind of physical barrier. But I bet if you really packed them in and had tons of herbs in combination with your brassicas, it might make a big difference. I have a really hard time germinating peppers and growing them to a full-size mature plant. But once they're mature, I pretty much never have issues with peppers getting pests on them. I don't know, I've never had issues with pests or diseases on peppers, so I find them to be really easy to grow. However, if it's something that you have issues with, peppers are another one where you can try growing things like onions, marigolds, and basil around them to help repel those pests and just keep each other healthy. And they also just don't compete for root space underground, so it's a good way to maximize space in an intensive planting situation. Just kind of going back to our three sisters method, if you're planting beans, corn, squash, and marigolds are really safe starting points to grow with if you're trying to companion plant and maximize the space that you're using. There's a million different other combinations. These are the most popular common ones that I see. If you're just starting out and you're feeling intimidated by this strategy or concept, you don't need to learn them all right away. And that's why you kind of heard me repeating myself on what plants you use where, because a lot of them are very multi-purpose, and I want to illustrate that to you so that you don't feel as overwhelmed by it as you're thinking through your garden plans. But if you do want more unusual or unique combinations to kind of dive deeper and research this, those are going to be in the chart that's linked in the description. In terms of an overall strategy, as you're kind of thinking through what's going to go where and planning out your garden layouts right now, I want you to be keeping really good notes. If you didn't do it last year or your first year gardening is this year, don't stress out about this too much, but think about going forward. I'm gonna try to do this more too because I'm not great about it. I'm like, I'll remember that next year when I'm planning again, and I never do. If you can once a week just go through and be like, soil seems more compacted, so that you know that that was an issue that you experienced last year, and making your companion planting decisions based on real data that you gathered from your own garden and circumstances. If this is all a brand new concept to you, the plants that I've discussed already are a really safe place to start. No matter whether you're gonna have these problems in your garden or not, they're gonna benefit. Because at the very least, even if you don't have hornworms attracted to your tomato plants, you've got marigolds in there that are attracting pollinators. Maybe those pollinators are helping to increase your yield by pollinating the flowers a little bit better. I would strongly encourage you to start at least thinking about what the specific challenges your garden faces are versus just going off of a chart and blindly following it. There's so many of them online already. I know I just told you I have one. There's even more out there. And some of them are really accurate, some of them not so much. And a lot of that is going to depend on your individual climate. So that's why I also tell you how important it is to find garden content creators who are growing in climates similar to yours. Like if you're watching this from California, the general mindset and strategies and tips might apply, but I can't tell you what kind of pests and problems that you're dealing with because I'm only an expert in the climate that I currently grow in. If you're overwhelmed, I would say just list out those basic common plants to start with, kind of cross off anything that seems like it's really not going to be relevant to your climate or situation, and go from there. All right, I'm going to remind you one more time to hit that subscribe button, like the video so you don't miss any future ones like this. Thank you so much for gardening with me, and I'll see you next time.